Hi, it's Roz, here to do a tag for Tag Tuesday, and I'm so behind with tags. I say that every time, don't I? I really enjoy them, and if I just did one a week, I'd keep up, wouldn't I? This one is the DNF Tag, which is by Scott and Nelle of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and it's a new tag that they originated just about 3 weeks ago, and they tagged me on the original tag, so of course I'm dead keen to do it. And it's been flying around already, and I know why it's been flying around. It's because it's a really good idea for a tag, because it gets you talking about and discussing the whole idea of not finishing books. Do you DNF, did not finish, them, label them like that? Do you bail? How, we're all different about that, and it's a good topic to talk about. So let's go for it. Question number 1 is, do you DNF? Do you do not finish things? Now, it's actually extremely unusual for me to not finish a book once I start it. Now, I think there's a couple of things going on there. One is that I have this a bit of a kind of Puritan work ethic thing going on, of like, I've got this book, I've started it, so I'll finish. Now, actually, life's too short, isn't it? There's not enough time, maybe, to read books that really aren't worth reading. But that just means that I try and pick books carefully so that I won't be in a place where I need to DNF them. And I'd only want to sort of stop a book if I really felt it was just a complete waste of my time. Because one of the things that I'm very clear about is that some of the books that have been most rewarding in the long run and that have stayed with me longest were not easy to get into. So I sneer at people who say, oh, if it hasn't really grabbed me in 50 pages, I'm gonna give up on it, because its job is to make me want to read it. And if that's the way you read, that's fine, but you're going to miss out on some of the most interesting experiences that reading can offer. I'm thinking of now, say I read 2666 by Roberto Bolaño, and if I was a sort of a DNFer, I'd have abandoned that one. But boy, I'm so glad that I read the whole thing. It's not my way to dump things. And maybe one of the things that makes a difference actually is that I am quite a quick reader. If I just feel like, oh, I've just got to finish this because I just want to get to the end and know whether it ever gets any better, and because I hate to just leave things hanging, then I can read it quite fast. And I guess if you're a slower reader, it would be fair enough to think, I'm not going to do that. Fair? Is that fair? Have I been fair now? I hope so. Question number 2, if you DNF a book, does it count towards books read for the month? Well, obviously not. How could anyone think that it could possibly count? If you haven't finished it, you haven't finished it. You haven't read it. You haven't read a book till you finish it. I'm going to think of another example here. The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. All the time I was reading that, I was thinking, what am I reading and why am I reading this? And then it really was only when I got to the end and looked back over the book that I thought, my goodness, actually, that was really good, and that's really kind of left something that resonates in my head. So it would have been really easy to abandon that, and a mistake. There are rubbish books out there, of course, it's not like I think, there's never a reason to not read a book, if you know what I mean. It's more like, pick the right books, people, come on. And no, it doesn't count if you haven't finished it. Is there a difference between DNF and just putting it down for a bit? Good question. Now, there are books that are there for dipping into. And so when I say I never sort of, or hardly ever DNF a book, there are books that I don't I might pick up a book to just like read a few pages to see if it's going to interest me. And there are books that I might sort of pop in and out of non-fiction things, or collections of poetry where, you know, it's not about reading the whole book, it's about a little taste. So that's not the same as DNFing it. And yes, there are some times when you're reading a book and there's nothing wrong with the book, but the timing is wrong for you. And in May I started Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, and it's really interesting and I want to read it and I will read it, but I just got kind of distracted by other things going on that I wanted to read more at that moment, just because they had a sort of, there was a couple of things for Caribathon, and then I think it happens to me particularly with non-fiction. Like I generally only will have one non-fiction thing that I read all the way through to the end at one time, rather than referencey things. And yeah, I got caught up in a couple of other non-fiction things, but I will go back to it. I have just put it down for a while. Another one is Ulysses. Here it is. Look, I absolutely have not abandoned reading this. I was really enjoying doing a read along of it earlier in the year, but when COVID-19 started, it just didn't feel like I wasn't in the right place, the right state of mind to get what I wanted out of this book. So I've put it to one side, but I'm not going to DNF it. I will go back to it. Another thing that sometimes some books naturally fall into bits, and I'm not quite sure whether it's not that I've DNF'd them, but it's like I've read one chunk of them and then I'll save the next bit. I've got an example here to explain that, because I'm not explaining that very well. So this is Kristin Leverandstatter by Sigrid Undset, and it's either one book or a trilogy, depending on which way you look at it. I would describe it as a trilogy. It is, like sort of 1,200 pages long if it was one book. I've read the first book. I thought it was great. I really want to read the other two, but I'm thinking I might read like one a year and spin it out, and I will really enjoy that. So again, it's not about DNFing it. Yeah, it's about timing things the way you want them. Now, question number 4: what popular book have you DNF'd? Well, as I say, it's not something I usually do, but I did think of something for this because you remember when the Da Vinci Code first came out, and Steve, my husband, read it, and so he'd got it out of the library, I think, and the copy was lying around, and I picked it up and I read the first page, and he said, "Stop! Don't do it, Ros. Don't read it. You're going to hate it. Don't even start. Don't get yourself caught up in it and then be irritated that you have to finish it." So there you go. That's a popular book that I DNF'd, but I didn't get past about 2 paragraphs. Did I DNF it if you told me not to? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Number 5. What book do you wish you DNF'd? Well, again, I will say I'm not a great DNFer, so it's hard to think of an example. Foucault's Pendulum, I stuck with it all the way to the end, and that was one of those books where I thought I might, towards the end, somehow it was going to come good and I was going to understand it and really understand, get the rewards for having invested all that time. And I'm not sure I ever did, but I wouldn't have wanted to not finish it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I have a sense of satisfaction that I did, I suppose. Is that a bit silly? I don't know. The one problem area for me is that I belong to a book group, which is great. That's not a problem. I love belonging to a book group. But sometimes the book group will choose a book which doesn't really interest me and that I don't find rewarding and satisfying, and I feel is a bit of a waste of my time. Why am I apologise for thinking that? And I absolutely wish I could have DNF'd some of those books, but I won't, because it's the golden rule of the book group for me that the book is picked and you jolly well read it, because that's the deal, and you shouldn't be part of a book group if you're not going to finish it. And some of the best discussions come from talking about books that you hate, so that's okay. A bit of a rant, so all right, isn't it? So my the one that I wish I could get that time back, I guess, is Eat, Pray, Love by, is it Elizabeth Gilbert? Oh, God, that was a terrible book. I hated that book. Really, actually, actively hated it. Yeah. We'll never get that time again. But we did have a good discussion about it, so that's okay. Do you ever attempt to read a DNF? Like, I know what it is. Do you ever attempt to go back to something that you DNF'd and have another go? I think that's the question. And has this ever been successful for you? Yes. As I say, it's not something I do very often, but if I do it, and it's going to kind of hang on in my mind and bother me. And so here's an example of one that I did, and that's Yvonne Winter's Night, A Traveller by Italo Calvino. And I've started reading this sometime in, I don't know, late 80s, and for some reason couldn't, something about, I suppose, my life at the time, whatever was going on that month or whatever, but I just couldn't get to grips with it. I mean, it's an odd book. Yeah, it's modernist experimental literary fiction, something like that. Is that what you call it? I don't know. You keep going. You keep thinking you're getting to grips with the story, and then it sort of undoes your preconceptions and starts again, and it's about this manuscript. Like, oh, well, I won't attempt to describe it. Anyway, so I did eventually, just about 2 years ago, go back and finish this, and I was glad that I did. So yes, it was successful for me. I think, yeah, it was the wrong book for the wrong moment for me, but it doesn't happen often. What do you do with books you DNF? Well, it's a bit sort of unapplicable, as I don't DNF, but I do like a kind of a book cull from time to time. Otherwise, books would take over the whole house from top to bottom. And if there were a book like something like Eat, Pray, Love that I wish I could have DNF'd, I do give them to charity shops. Things that I don't finish or discard or I'm given to read and don't read, they're quite often ones that somebody else might enjoy, if that makes sense. The fact that I don't like it doesn't mean that nobody would. Yeah, so I don't hesitate to give them away. Question number 8. Do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNFing? That is a very good question, because I think this is the absolutely crucial kind of solution to whether or not you're going to end up doing a lot of DNFing. Now, because I don't like to DNF, I am very, very picky these days about what I read, and that's a trouble with the book group, because I don't get to be so picky. But apart from that, I choose with care. I listen to people whose opinions I value. I read reviews. Now, am I picking things that are less risky? Well, they're not. They're not less challenging, because actually, I've only got so much life left and so many books left to read, and I want every book I read to be worth its time that I'm going to spend on it. So it's more like I'm avoiding the risk of reading something that I think is just rubbish, rather than avoiding a kind of a risky choice, as in something that might be a bit different or challenging, or not the kind of thing I've read before. Or yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I don't want to read rubbish, but most of the time you can avoid it if you do a bit of checking. Yeah. Okay, that was all the questions. What very good questions, and I'm really enjoying watching everybody else's answers to these questions, because in fact people are really, really different. And reader that I think it's compulsory to mention Sean the Book Maniac when doing this tag, and I would say I love Sean and I love his attitude to books, and I think we have a lot of things in common in our taste in books. but I find his kind of gung-ho attitude to bailing on books fairly inexplicable. Yeah, so I'm enjoying, as I say, people's answers and finding out who's a Sean and who's a Roz, if that makes sense. And so, last thing is to tag some people, and I really am interested in hearing other people's answers. So I'm gonna, yes, I'm tagging people because sometimes I kind of struggle a bit to tag people at the end of book tags, but I really, really want to. I am going to tag 5 lovely booktube women, Karen of Runwright reads, Peg of the History Shelf, because she reads a lot of non-fiction, and I wonder if that is, I wonder if that's different about DNFing, you know, because it's not like a story that has like a beginning and an end. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what she says if she does this. 2 women that I can't really imagine DNFing. Alba of Seriela and Hannah of Hannah's Books, because again I think they're careful choosers and they're quite persistent people, but I might be completely wrong. And last one is Valentina Garcia, the reading companion, because it looks like she's just started posting videos again after a bit of a gap. So it would be lovely if she did this tag. There you go.